Hey, all, welcome to Oddly Successful, a podcast that celebrates people who followed their instincts, went against the grain, and found success outside of the traditional 9 to 5. I'm your host, Alexander Lafredo Dietrich, and as always, I invite you to check out our podcast on your favorite platforms and YouTube. And you can follow us on Instagram and YouTube by searching at Oddly Successful. And today I have a very special treat because the whole reason we're doing the podcast is because of this gentleman right here. We are interviewing Roger Osorio, who is an author, a coach, a speaker, podcast host, and he helps people discover and date and develop healthy relationships with their passion and their purpose. And he's been doing this for over a decade, getting people from something that they're very passionate about and actually turning that into a viable business. So I don't want to dive too deep into that yet. I want to give you the chance for that, Roger. But in addition to that, he also teaches entrepreneurship to educators at the Graduate School of Education at the University of Pennsylvania. And he's also an author, having written The Journey to Reinvention, and also has his own podcast called the School of Reinvention podcast. So first of all, thanks for being on the show, Roger. I appreciate it.
Hey, man, I appreciate you launching your podcast and then, the honor of getting to be the capstone to yours.
Yeah, man. I wanted to bring you on here like the second that I had this going, let me get some momentum underneath me and then bring them on. So
I appreciate that. I did very similar things. There were like some people I had in mind, and I'm like, I don't want you to be one of my first ones. Yeah. I want to be ready for you. Like I want to get the most out of this. So yeah. I need some practice.
100%, man, 100%. But yeah, man, I appreciate you being on the show, and I wanted to start because I think you're such the epitome of finding success in a very winding journey. You had gone through a couple of reinventions. And I think like the first one was reinventing yourself into a math teacher of all disciplines. Let's just start like how you even got there. And then I want to touch into why math, but let's just start with the journey.
Yeah, for sure. So I graduated from university in 2004 with degrees in finance and international business. And then I went into a leadership development program at a company called Ingersoll Rand. And so it's a really structured program. Some people say it's like university. It's like the fifth year of university. It's like, kind of university continuing, because you're just in this group with all these people who just graduated from their universities all around the country. And we're all coming into this new company together, kind of getting spread out across the planet in different locations. And so I got into that job in 2004, and I worked there for 4 years, moving around, because in those programs, you have to go from one assignment to another. And it was in 2007 that I started to become, after 3 years in the program and some pretty good success in the program. By then I was a national account salesperson, and my client was Anheuser-Busch, which was really awesome because they work hard, but they play hard. And as their national account sales rep for a beer cooler that we made for them, we got to travel to all the places that they go, including the Super Bowl in 2007.
Oh, that's awesome.
But that same year, even after going to an event like Super Bowl and all the parties in Miami for Bud Bowl and everything, I started to, discover the startup scene in San Francisco and what was going on out there in Silicon Valley. And a lot of stuff started like catching my interest. And I was like curious about a lot of this stuff. Like, what's all this activity? Like all these startups popping up, and what's this all about? What's this whole entrepreneurship thing, which obviously now is so normal, and you hear about it all the time. And they're teaching it in high schools at this point, but that wasn't happening when I was in high school. And not even in university. Like at Penn State, there was like this tiny little entrepreneurship program back then, and it was kind of mixed into something else, so it wasn't even like a standalone. And so I became curious about this, and a buddy of mine and I just started like thinking about ideas, what could we bring to life or whatever. And along the way, I took on a job teaching math at a learning center, so I can make a little extra money to pay off my student loans. And I started to fall in love with teaching math, and I didn't know what to do with that in 2007. So I just kept working my day job and kept teaching math by night. Fast forward to 2008, I decided I want to take a major step in this new direction. I don't exactly know how I'm going to do it, but I do know that I want to land in the classroom. I want to be a classroom math teacher. And I didn't even know exactly like all that meant, but I was certain that that's
Hmm.
what I wanted, and I knew why I wanted it. And so I said, well, let me go figure that out. So 2008, I took the leap. I, put a good plan together so that I could do that responsibly. And then I
Hmm.
left my company in, I think it was June 2008. So yeah. So I had my dating period with my
Yeah.
interest of math for like a year. Like we
Yeah.
dated for a year before I made the
Hmm.
decision.
They're like, this is the one. This is the one I want to be
Yeah.
with. Yeah.
But it took time. Like
Yeah.
I had to date it for a while. Like I couldn't
Hmm.
just, go off like a few tutoring gigs and say, wow, I really like this. I want to quit my job. It was more like, I really like this. I want to learn more. I kind of want to
Yeah.
discover more about this. So let me date it. Let me get to know it better. And that's where, all those tutoring hours, for a whole year really
Hmm.
made that impact.
So when you left your company to go make that shift, were you able to just get right into the classroom, or were there a couple, I guess, side or stepping stones rather, in order to get you from that point A to the point B?
Yeah. Well, the short answer to that, it took me 4 years to get into the classroom. So I left
Mm.
the company in 2008, but I did not walk into a classroom as a math teacher until 2012.
Mm.
So 4 years later, almost like just about 2 months to the day.
Yeah.
And so it took quite, there were many steps, and I didn't even know what they were going to be, but I did know one of them was learning something new. And so
Hmm.
I went back to school to get a master's in psychology because I felt that psychology, and specifically the subtopic of executive coaching and
Okay.
leadership development, taught us a lot about how to guide someone through a transformation, how to help them
Mm.
have a breakthrough. And I felt like, just from my experience tutoring math students, these students don't need more math or more pedagogy or more
Yeah.
textbooks or more explanations or a magical explanation. That's not what they need. They need a breakthrough. They need a breakthrough in limiting beliefs. They need a breakthrough in confidence. They need a breakthrough in action orientation, like the willingness and the courage to just try
Hmm.
something. That's what they really needed. And so I thought to myself, well, learning more math is probably not going to help me. I felt like I know enough math, and I could just read a math book, and I'll figure out what I don't know so
Yeah.
that I could be ready for the subject part of it. But most of the challenge with math students was more about confidence, limiting beliefs, and courage. And if I
Mm.
could address those three things, then I thought and I believed that I would be more successful as a math teacher. So I took a big shot, a big risk, I guess you could say, in choosing to get my master's in psychology, because it was not the traditional path to,
Yeah.
by traditional, I mean the traditional alternative path,
Yeah.
meaning when you want to go from one career to
Hmm.
teaching, there is a path. You
Hmm.
can do certain things to get licensed to be in the classroom in a public school. And I didn't do that because I felt that it wasn't going to be the best set of skills to help me
Hmm.
be the most impactful in the classroom. And so I took a chance on this. I said, you know what, I'm going to give it a shot, and I'll figure it out when I figure it out.
Yeah.
And so I went through that program for 2 years. So all of 2009, all of 2010, I worked on my master's in psychology. And that was a big milestone, big stepping stone. I continued tutoring, by the way, during
Hmm.
that time. And I saw the transformation in just me as a tutor,
Yeah.
and my students. As I learned stuff, I put it right into like practice.
Hmm.
So I loved it because I finished doing a homework assignment. I go, and let's say I read like 2 or 3 research papers on a topic, and I go, wait a minute, I could use this in my tutoring sessions.
Yeah.
So let me test it out on these kids and see what
Yeah.
happens. And I just kept testing things out, and things kept working. And so yeah, it was a lot of fun, but it still took time to get into the classroom because I took a slightly longer path, if you want to
Hmm.
call it that.
Well, you mentioned, like, hey, I didn't need to know more math. I needed to help people get breakthroughs. And I think, yeah, I think one of the things that at least I've noticed in myself is there's this misplacement in what we need to do in order to get to where we need to go. And what I mean by that, like, for instance, I'm trying to break into more music, more audio
Mhm.
production sort of stuff. And I can sit there and I can crack open a book on music theory, and I can crack open, different pieces of sheet music and things like that. And those have their place when maybe I'm confronted with a
Mhm.
music problem that I don't know how to get over. But when it comes to, okay, how do I get my stuff out in front of people? How do I, show what I'm capable of? A lot of times we think that like, well, nobody's going to like it because we're not good enough, but we haven't even tried that. And so the response seems to be, let me practice more music, but we've never actually cured the real problem, which is, well, put it out there and then
Yeah.
see if you need to learn more in that subject or learn more in the networking or whatever that is. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm not sure
I
if you're researching.
No, you know
Yeah.
that what you just shared is the distinction that was so obvious to me when like I saw that so clearly, that problem when
Hmm.
I worked on my book. So
Mm.
uh, I thought if you write a great book, it will kind of like the people will come, if you will. If you build it, they
Hmm.
will come, that kind of thing. And you learn when you're writing your book that there are two very separate things that are happening here. One is writing a book, and the other is selling a book.
Yeah.
And bestsellers are not necessarily great writers,
Hmm.
and great writers are rarely ever bestsellers. And so these two, it's really hard to be both. It's like you're either one or the other. Robert Kiyosaki, the author of
Yep.
Rich Dad Poor Dad. I
Yep.
think it's in Rich Dad Poor Dad that he shares this. If not, it's in Cash Flow Quadrant, where he says that I was in a room with like real writers, like rock stars at writing, people who could write, just brilliant stuff. And I was the best-selling author in that room. And, people were definitely like a little upset that like,
Yeah.
oh man, this guy edged us. How did he do that? And whatever. And he goes, it wasn't because I wrote a better book. Your books are better written than mine. It's because I'm a better seller. That's
Yeah.
what I'm good at. Best selling doesn't mean best writing, best written.
Hmm.
It means literally best selling. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, those are two skills. And what I'm hearing in your story is the distinction between, your craft and then selling that craft or promoting that craft and
Hmm.
getting your craft in front
Yeah.
of the right people. And those are two very, very, very different skills. And yeah, I had to manage that as well because I was getting way better at my craft, between adding in the layers of psychology, knowing the math and just continuing to learn the math by reading up on it again. I I knew my craft was there, but I did have to figure out how do I sell this? Like,
Yeah.
how do I make sure people know that I exist and know that I'm out there doing things? And that's a networking issue. That's
Yeah.
a networking problem. That's not a math performance problem. But I would often like challenge people to put me in the classroom for like a day. And
Mm.
they usually do that. So usually when you go to a school, they want to demo you, try you out, especially in private schools and stuff like that. And then because the hiring process is less formal, there's no like union contracts, all that.
Yeah.
So they want to try you out in the classroom. And I remember they were like, well, we'll give you a lesson that you have to prepare, like a topic, and then we'll schedule a day.
Hmm.
And I said, let's do it today. Is there time? Like, when's the next session? And they're like, no, like, come on, like you
Yeah.
should prepare and all that. I go, you know what? Put me in the room and don't tell me the topic. Just put me in the room. Like, let's go visit the teacher.
Yeah.
And as long as he's cool with it. And they were like, oh, he is, because he's not the real teacher. He's filling in for a teacher that left in the
No.
middle of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
school year. So they brought me in the middle of school year. So they're like, this guy does not want to be in there because he teaches a whole nother thing. Like
Yeah.
he's just like kind of like, trying to save us,
He's trying to
right
hold it
now.
together. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all he's doing. So yeah, don't worry. He will not mind you walking in and taking over his class. I said, all right. So then I'll ask a bunch of questions. I'll figure out what topic we're on, and then I'll continue the lesson from where we left off, which is an executive coaching skill, by the way.
Huh.
And so, because with coaching, what you have to do is you have to meet your client where they are. And
Yeah.
the best way to do that is through questions. You ask many
Mm.
questions, you figure out where the client really is. They might think they're here, but they're really a few steps back or a few steps forward or a few to
Yeah.
the side. Through questioning, we figure out where you really are because we need to have your starting point so that we can figure out your path to the goal that you're trying to get to. And so I just did the same thing with these students. I asked a lot of questions. Once I figured out where they are, I knew better than even the teacher would have, because I knew that even though technically speaking, they were on whatever topic they were on, I cannot remember what topic it was. This was a long time ago. Through questioning, I realized, they have gaps in the requisite topics.
Hmm.
So they're really not there. They're there based on the schedule, but they're
Yeah.
not there developmentally, or not develop, but in terms of their learning journey, they're
Yeah.
not really there. They're missing some things that without these things, if I don't plug those holes quickly, they're not going to be able to get there
Yeah.
quickly, or they're not going to be able to do it effectively. And so, yeah, right away, I just started filling in those gaps. And then from there, I went right back to the main topic, and we were able to achieve a few things. And the headmistress and the principal were like, done, sold. When can you start?
Dang.
I said, I have a couple meetings in the next couple of days. So my calendar's a bit booked up, but I can start like, Monday. And
Yeah.
they were like, Monday it is. And so that was it. So yeah,
Wow.
like that's a selling skill.
Yeah.
See, that's not the math. I mean, I had to use the math to my skill to put that on, like, eventually, but to get that opportunity, you have to demonstrate confidence. You have to be able to talk, say the right things to help convince somebody that they should give you that shot in the room right now, this moment, no prep, let's go in.
Yeah, that is, I mean, that is confidence incarnate, but it sounds like so much of it, like as you were talking, there's a word that came to my head, and that was orientation.
Mm,
Um, because what it sounds like is uh, through the process of questioning other people, they may not know exactly where they're at, but they have the information to get there. They just
mhm,
may need someone to help them put the pieces together. And so it sounds like through whether it's executive coaching or talking to the students or talking to the teacher,
mhm.
like the first step before you're even able to aim for a direction and shoot for whatever that success looks like is, well, let us establish where we're at in the here and now.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I feel like maybe a lot of people try to, like, I want something, but they're so disoriented that they kind of go
Yeah.
all over the place. What are your
Yes.
thoughts?
No, absolutely. I like that. That's the word that, you kind of gravitated towards, because, and I never thought about it in that word or using that word. And as I think about it now, it's exactly that. If you don't even, again, going back to, if you don't know where you are right now, with certainty, then,
Mhm.
it's like you've got a map and you're somewhere new. I mean, if you don't know where you are here, that's why all maps, like at the mall, say you are here,
Yeah.
or the airport, they say you are here, because it's
Thank
a
goodness.
worthless map,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's a worthless map if it doesn't tell you where you are, and so you have to at least know where you're starting.
Mhm.
And I feel like grabbing all those clues, asking all those questions, even just by the mere act of these folks or these students answering those questions, they just become clear on, oh, I guess I didn't know that, or oh, I guess I'll need to know that. And all of a
Mhm.
sudden they're putting together their own, like, kind of um position on the
Yeah.
map. Like, where am I on this learning journey that I need to be on? And it turns out that, oh, I'm maybe not as hotshot as I thought I was. That's a
Mm.
tough one to swallow sometimes, but
Yeah.
it is important, because the sooner you swallow that, the sooner we can get moving and helping you to, break through whatever the limits are, and let's get you to where you need to be.
Yeah.
Other times it's like, I didn't even remember that that was a thing that I needed to remember, or I didn't know that was a thing I needed to remember that would ever come back. And I'm like, oh, that one is going to come back, and that's okay.
Mhm.
We'll work on it real quick. Let's fill in that gap real quick, because it's useless to try to cover this advanced topic if these little gaps are, empty and missing.
Mhm. So then, you'd mentioned along this way, like, so you'd started your businesses, you got your masters, and now you're in the classroom.
Hmm.
um and you're realizing, okay, as I'm using some of these psychology principles or coaching principles with these students, you're starting to see different breakthroughs. And what was, I guess there's like the mathematical breakthroughs, but it seems like you're pointing to something else, maybe the utilizing of those mathematics. Like, what did that look like in the day to day for your students?
Yeah. So for me, I always worked with the students. Well, I did have one advanced class, but most of my classes, I should say, were the students who struggled the most.
Mm.
So, many times in schools, they track where, like lower level, middle level, and on advanced level.
Yep.
And so I usually took the lower level classes.
Hmm.
And the biggest breakthrough I discovered working with those students was that the only thing that held them back from being in any of the two levels above that was simply just a limiting belief. It was a belief that they were not good enough,
Hmm.
that they were not meant for math, that they're not math people, that they are something else people, you fill in a blank.
Mm.
And I discovered that I simply needed to help them first see that there is no such thing as a math person, And there isn't. There is the closest there is to a math person. By the way, I did look this up because I was curious. Like, is there anything remotely close to a math gene?
Yeah.
And the only thing that exists that is remotely close to a math gene is a gene that allows you to estimate more accurately than
Hmm.
maybe someone who doesn't have that gene, or
Interesting.
that gene, whatever,
Yeah.
sequence, or I don't know how it's called. So that means that, for instance, when you're working on a problem, you can kind of ballpark it should be in the 200s or low 200s. I think that would make sense. And what that does is that, imagine you're a student, you have this ballpark range for the answer, you get something that's outside of the ballpark, right
Yeah.
away you're pretty certain, oh, this has got to be wrong, I better work on it again. And just by looking at it again, you find that, oops, forgot to carry that, or oops, forgot to make that a negative. Okay, let me fix that, and then voila, you're there. It's like better. You're
Hmm.
like, ah, look at that, it's
Yeah.
227. That's pretty certain. So that right there, as a student, makes you just feel more comfortable in the math
Yeah.
classroom. You're like, oh, I can kind of figure it out.
Hmm.
And then, so that's like the closest thing that exists. And it's not even like anything that is um, like a deal breaker for math or anything like that. You could still figure problems out and all of that. So
Hmm.
that's the closest. And I always put that out there. And I told my students this because I wanted them to know that the only way it impacts you is that you kind of move a little faster, a little bit more confidently than someone else who doesn't have that. That's it. Like, and then we're talking, that's barely giving you an edge.
Yeah.
I mean, you still need a lot of other intervention for that to really count for anything.
Yeah.
But it does make you a little bit more comfortable. So
Yeah.
that's fine. Once I got through that and I shared with them that, the only thing that separates you from any of the other students that are doing better, whether it's in this class or in another class, is simply the practice. That's it. It's
Mhm.
practice. That's all it is. I go, so I had in this first classroom that I had at the all girls school where I taught. I remember I had a lot of ballerinas, so a lot of
Mhm.
dance students. And so they were going to dance classes, and they spent like 3 to 4 hours a day in dance practice after school. So imagine they were leaving school around like whatever, 4 o'clock or something. They probably got dance starting around 5. They're there until about 8 or 9. They're home by like 9:30 or 10. They got a shower, eat something real quick, and that's when they do their homework.
Hmm.
So you've spent 3 to 4 hours on your final good solid 3 to 4 hours on dance, and then you give your last 2 worst hours to
Yeah.
math or to whatever, splitting it up across subjects. I go, come on, how do you expect to be better than someone, at least just from that way of being, than someone who spends their best 3 to 4 hours on their homework and
Mhm.
specifically their math? Like, it's you can't, like, you're not just going to magically be good at math or anything like that. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
And so I go, it makes sense that they're going to be better at this, but guess what, you're a better dancer than they are.
Yeah.
So and I wanted them to know it's all about where you put your focus and your time.
Yeah.
And so this was like a massive breakthrough for me, for the students, because all of a sudden it showed them, okay, first of all, it's okay that I'm not doing great in math. It doesn't make sense for me to be an outstanding math student yet, because I dedicate most of my time to other activities.
Mm.
And so, but then it also shows them the flip side of that, which is, well, then that means it's just a matter of time and focus.
Mhm.
That's the
Yeah.
only thing standing in my way. So this is not like something that I'm built for or not built for. That means nothing here. It's all about time and focus. If I give a little more time and focus, and then I said, and I'm going to do you one better. I'm going to do one thing better for you. I'm going to add in one more thing. I am going to My job is to figure out what is the least amount that you have to do, or not the least, but what are the things you could do that will make the greatest impact? What's the
Mhm.
20% that can drive 80% of the outcome?
Yeah.
That, as your teacher, that's my job. Like, I don't want you spinning your wheels on a bunch of mindless practice that is
Yeah.
not going to move the needle. No, I
Mhm.
trust me to be the needle mover for you, but I do need you to put in the time and the focus. See, because
Mm.
that part I can't do for you. So
Yeah.
I can only make sure that the practice you do take
Mhm.
is going to be the kind of impactful practice that makes sense. And I think that goes for just about anything. And I think that's where coaches can help, or mentors can help, especially if they know the path more clearly and they know the subject better, whatever it might be. They can help you figure out, like, how can I shortcut your efforts
Mm.
so that whatever time and focus you give has a higher ROI.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's I think one of the things that I've realized from teaching jujitsu and music and things like that in the past is how how much of teaching in my experience wasn't sharing how much I know, is withholding information. Because, the more you word vomit at somebody, they're not going to be able to absorb all that, period. So it's like, okay, what out of what I know does this person actually need right now? Not more, not less. What is that little bit that's going to get them to the next stage that is digestible enough for them to keep them in the fight a little bit longer, to get them a little bit better, so that way they can last for the next little bit of information. And it sounds like, when you were talking about like, yeah, my job is to figure out what's that 20% that's going to make the greatest impact. There's got to be a ton of restraint and self-awareness too, in being able to, to filter out all that information,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you actually touched on something that I didn't mention yet, but it was a powerful practice in the classroom. And I learned it from a book called What the Best College Teachers or Best College Professors Do.
Mhm.
And I don't remember the author right now. But this book was essentially about these, like, so I forget how many principles he distilled it down to. And his research method for this was incredible because he actually followed students even years after they left the class with a teacher, because he felt that the reviews that teachers get right after the semester are actually not good. They could be manipulated too easily. For instance, I could make sure that I create the most pleasant and fun or nicest experience during the time of those forms that they go out,
Yep.
the reviews and all that, and the evaluations. There we go. And so, then I know my students are like feeling really good and warm and fuzzy about my class, and they're probably going to give me like the best reviews. I could also be better at reminding them, hey, everybody, if you haven't filled it out, here's the link. Let me make it easy for you. It takes about 2 minutes, like, really helps me out, all that. And they're having a great time that week or 2 weeks. So he found that this is not really a good indicator. He also found that usually people who do well get good grades give good reviews. People who get bad grades give bad reviews, which is also not a good indicator of is this teacher any good or not. But he figured if a teacher's really good, they should be able to make an impact 4 to 5 years later, meaning the impact should still be felt 4 to 5 years later. And so he figured out how to do this. And one of the principles he learned was that you need to show your students that you too put on your pants one leg at a time. And I think that's literally how he starts the chapter, if I remember correctly. I read this book like 10 or more than 10, 15 years ago. And he says, you got to remind them that that's what you do.
Yeah.
And that was a big idea, because what he's essentially saying is, don't try to be the smartest person in the room. Don't try to be the most knowledgeable person in the room, because that's not your mission. Your mission is to help these people learn, not to show off your skills. And not that he was saying that that's what people are trying to do, but often we believe that if we're the teacher, we need to portray ourselves as the expert in the room, which means I have to show you my knowledge. And the best way to do that is to, with all good intentions, is to answer your questions, right? Like if you ask me a question and say, Mr. Osorio, how do you prove the quadratic formula or whatever, something along those lines? Well, then, like, best way for me to do it would be like, or in my mind, if I'm like not thinking too deeply about it, is like, well, let me just show you. And then you'll see that obviously I'm the authority in the classroom. Whereas this guy, the author of this book, said, no, the best college professors wouldn't say that. They would actually begin an exercise by probably saying something along the lines of, you know what? I don't know. Let's figure it out. And then get the whole class involved, send a few people up to the board. Let's try a few things. Where do you think we should start? Then the person says something. Yeah, just give me an idea. What do you think? Like, let's just play around with it, see what happens. And like most things, when we play around with it and see what happens for a little bit, we kind of figure out, like, we tinker our way to a solution. And so that's exactly it. It's withholding it. I learned to say, I don't know. Like, that was my go-to. I would always tell students, I don't know. I'm not sure, but let's figure it out. And that became my thing. So most students, like at the beginning, would be frustrated by that because they just wanted the answer.
Like, why are
and
you
I'm
here?
like, yeah. And I'm like, you're not getting the answer from me. So I'm here to help you get the answer. That's my job. And that's it. That is, you're right. It's a big, big differentiator in teaching, is to be able to do that.
But, I also think, like, what's the other side of the coin to that too, is because when, I think naturally, in a classroom setting, no matter how much the teacher brings them, tries to level themselves with the students, there's still going to be that teacher-student dynamic. And for a student to sit there and be like, here's an authority, the authority, who doesn't know, I don't know, how different can I be from the teacher? And then you figure it out, and then it's like, the teacher figured it out, and I feel like I learned something. So now you begin, I'm guessing, making this disconnect between being an authority, being an expert, and that being the determining factor of success versus, no, the only thing that's a determining factor of success is your ability to figure it out, which, you can do on the spot if you need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wanted to be the guide because
Yeah.
that's what we should be in the
Mhm.
classroom, is a guide. We're there to facilitate. We're facilitators. We're guides. And when we do that, then students are empowered to
Mhm.
lead the way, to walk, to try, to run, to stumble, fall, and then get back up again. And I'm there to be the facilitator and the guide to help them get back up again. And let's give it another shot.
Yeah.
Let's keep on trying until we get there.
Yeah.
And that absolutely makes a difference in the room, in the dynamic, in the culture of the classroom. Of course, there's still such thing as classroom management. I needed to learn that. That was the one thing I was missing the most. All the psychology, that I learned about how to help people have breakthroughs, all the math I already knew going into the job, none of that was going to help me with classroom management. And that's where you have to then, really be in charge.
Yeah.
But those are different things. That has nothing to do with the learning. That has everything to do with protecting the integrity of the space for learning. And that's where we have rules and all of this kind of stuff. And so, one of the things that I did there was at the beginning, I spent the first week of school, rather than diving into math, I spent it on a lot of things, going over the rules of the classroom. Here's how things work. This is how our space works. These are the rules of the room, and these need to be respected. And here's what happens when you don't. This way, there's no debating. There's no like, oh, it's not fair. No, or like so and so that no, everyone's going to get the same. I made it pretty clear up front.
Yeah.
So, if you miss this, you lose these points. That's it. And it's
Yeah.
okay. Look, if you can't get to the homework, then make the calculation. Decide that strategically, this is an okay thing to miss. I'm going to take the hit. I'm going to take the few points off hit. Because right now I really need to put my time into something else. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Please do that. Use that. You don't have to be perfect here. You need to know the rules so that you can use them to your advantage, so that you can get your overall mission done, which is not just math, by the way.
Yeah.
You're a dancer, you're in English class, you're in science, you're in history, you're in all these other places. So, you're a daughter, you're, when I taught in the high school, you're a son or a daughter, whatever, you gotta still look, you're looking at a much broader picture than I am, but I'm going to make clear how the rules work in this room so that you can then navigate them and figure out what to do. And so that's where I learned, and then of course, when people don't follow that, you have to then, of course, follow through with whatever the consequence is, as you originally stated. But at the same time, that week, I also asked them, what are their goals? We did goal writing. I go, look, this is not, I don't want you to feel like this is all about rules. No, this is about you at the end of the day. These rules are simply meant to get you to the finish line in the most effective way that I can at least come up with. And so, but I need to know what your finish line is. So what is your finish line? And don't say it's to get an A, because that's a stupid finish line. I didn't say it's stupid, but I said that's not an exciting finish line.
Yeah.
It's not exciting to just say that, because you're not going to feel any better. You'll feel better for like a minute, and then you'll move on, and that's it.
Yeah.
And then if you're really not great at this and you just barely got that A, you'll simply have more problems next year.
Yeah.
Because the next teacher is going to assume that you know all this stuff going into their class. So what's your goal in all of this? Some of my students wrote really interesting things. I should see if I could find what they wrote me. Maybe I kept it somewhere, but I heard things like, or I read things like, they want to feel like they can do this, like that they're not stupid. They wrote that. I don't want to be dumb at this. And that broke my heart, first of all, because that obviously they're telling me right now they feel dumb, they feel insignificant, they feel less than in this subject. And I'm like, not going to be the case at the end of the year,
Yeah.
because that is what I'm going to make sure of. Like, I will do whatever it takes to make sure that you do not leave this classroom feeling that you are not worthy, you're not good enough at this, and all of that. You are not dumb. You're none of those things. The word dumb doesn't even work in my classroom. Neither does the word smart. Like,
Yeah.
when students use the word smart, I go, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
Like, really, tell me, what does smart mean at the end of the day? Nothing. Like, it means absolutely nothing. It's a quick moment in time snapshot, maybe, that we can say to somebody because something they did, we, subjectively, assess to be quote unquote smart.
Yeah.
But it really does nothing. It tells me nothing about any of your abilities. It tells me nothing. So I had to teach my girls, like, in the class, in the all girls school, no, we're not doing this whole smart or dumb thing. Those words have zero meaning in this room. Either you put in the time or you don't put in the time. That's it.
How would you say, now you have your own business, you've written a book, you have your podcast. How do some of these things translate to people outside the classroom?
So explain that question again. I didn't
Well,
get it.
So you've mentioned like helping people get through some of these limiting beliefs. We'll use your previous example. Maybe there's somebody who wants to start their own business, but they're like, I'm not an entrepreneur, even though they have this feeling that they just don't want to work for somebody else, right? Maybe they have the spirit, but not the mindset for it. And so how do some of these things that you had implemented in the classroom in your journey apply to people outside the classroom?
Yeah, no, great question. Now I get it. Sorry about that. So, when I worked at IBM, I say I taught at IBM because I did teach at IBM.
You did.
But when I worked at IBM and I would teach classes there, workshops and all of that, it's funny because people would ask me sometimes, how are you, like, in the Q&A at the end, I go, anybody have any questions? And literally some people in some sessions would raise their hand and ask me, how are you so comfortable standing there? And the way you're speaking, and how does everything just flow out of your mouth, like, so, calmly, confidently, just smoothly. And I would joke. I mean, I was joking kind of, but serious too. And I would say, well, I used to teach middle school math at an all girls school. So once you've done that, you can pretty much work with any audience in the world. So long as there are no middle school girls here, I'm going to be as comfortable and cool, calm, and collected as ever. And then I would look around. I go, there are no middle school girls here, right? and they would laugh for a bit, but I would explain that that so many of the things that I learned managing a classroom, and also leading a classroom and leading learners, works here completely the same. I again, kind of jokingly, but not totally jokingly, I would say you all are really not that different from middle school girls and high school kids, because I also taught at a high school. And I go, y'all are not that different, that you'd be surprised, like, how many similarities there are. I might point to somebody in the room and say, like, look, you're on your phone. Look, you're on your laptop and all of that. I mean, I had that stuff in the classroom, and in this kind of session, because it's not a classroom, it's like a lecture, I would tell them, fine, do whatever you want, like, that's your thing. But if this was a classroom, it'd be different. And I remember one time in Austin, I was teaching a session there, and I still remember being in the room and like where this person was. But for the workshop, for the session I was teaching that morning, we didn't need laptops. It was going to be very hands-on, just paper, pencil, a little bit of whiteboard, and easel and whatever stuff like that, Post-its, that kind of thing. And so nobody needed a laptop. And so I said, as I would tell my students in school, all right, everybody, laptops down. We don't need them right now. I'll tell you when we need them again. And this one guy didn't put it down. Everyone else had put it down, but he didn't. And then I went over to him and I asked him, hey, can you please put the laptop down? We're not going to need it right now. And he said, I'm all good. Don't worry about it. And, he's trying to be cool like that. I was like, all right. Well, in the classroom, I learned that you have to, this moment, if I stand down and let this stay, I am harming all the other students. So let's say there were like 30 in the room, which I think there were. So 29 people will suffer if I let this guy go, because they're here to learn. And they already demonstrated that to me by putting their laptops down and showing that they were ready to learn. And this one person is challenging the integrity of the space we're trying to create for learning. And they're going to look at me, and they're right now looking very carefully at how I respond.
Hmm.
And because they want me to protect the integrity of this learning space. And so I knew right then and there, just like I knew in the classroom with students, that I need to stand up to this. And it's not about like setting myself as the authority or trying to be
Hmm.
the, the big person in the room that, whatever, uh, flashes their authority, whatever, does all that kind of stuff. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with protecting the integrity of the learning space so that we can all have a really good learning experience. And so I needed to confront him. And so just like I would have done in the classroom, I stood right in front of him and I waited calmly. And then I said, as soon as you put it down, we'll start class.
Hmm.
And that's it. And I just waited calmly. I didn't like, I looked at him a little bit, but I
Yeah.
didn't like try to look mean or anything like that.
Yeah.
And then eventually he realized, okay, this guy's not going to move away. And everyone's starting to get probably pretty pissed at me
Yeah.
because I'm the one holding up the class, not him.
Yeah.
I'm like right now, he's put the spotlight on me. And that was it. He put it down. And then you also have to make sure that in a situation like that, you don't like try to act like, got you. Like, there you go.
Yeah.
No, it's as if nothing ever happened after that. You
Yeah.
forget it quickly. You just gone. This moment never happened. Let's continue on, because the last thing I want is for him to feel a spotlight, because I also have to protect the integrity of his learning. And
Yeah.
if he feels that he's got like, a spotlight on him and that I'm going to treat him differently and I'm going to be harsher to him or whatever, then he's not going to learn either.
Yeah.
So, so these things applied
Yeah.
at IBM and all of that. But so many more things, truly it
Hmm.
is like when I work with people in learning situations, it's the breakthroughs in confidence. It's helping them have the confidence to speak up and raise their hand, especially the people who don't usually raise their hand in a corporate setting or whatever
Yeah.
it might be. I was doing a session at Google a couple months ago, and there were people there, and I just assumed like, oh, Googlers are probably all going to raise their hand and all going to be like super. No, but there's some people that I had to engage them first. But if I
Hmm.
did it delicately, they would play full out. They
Yeah.
weren't trying to not be involved. They wanted to be involved. So it doesn't matter where you are. It's everyone is a little bit different and it also depends on the learning environment and what we're doing. And
Yeah.
my sessions tend to be pretty different. They're very hands-on. I expect a lot of I expect a lot of active participation from everybody. So I
Hmm.
don't do a lot of passive kind of like lectures and things like that. It's going to be like, all right, open up the tab, create an account, let's go. We're getting to work right now.
Yeah.
We're building your podcast today. Wait, what do you mean? I thought I was going to take notes on how to build a podcast and then maybe do it later. No, we're building it right now. So there are no notes to take
Yeah.
unless you want to write down everything that you're doing, but you're going to do it.
Yeah. So is
And so,
this? Oh, I'm sorry. Go
yeah.
ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask. Is this? You had mentioned like you have a program, a new program that you're
Yeah.
creating or have created about helping people take these interests and develop those passions. Is this like descriptive of what you're doing?
Yeah, a little bit. So, I've been on this journey since, like I said, 2008 when I quit my first corporate job so that I can start pursuing, a life that was aligned with my values, passions, and purpose. And that started with pursuing an interest in math, right? I
Hmm.
dated math for a little while, and then I decided to make a more serious commitment to math. And since then, I've done this with a lot of different things, including executive coaching, writing a book, teaching entrepreneurship, which is one I'm still involved in very actively. And so there's a lot of relationships that started off with dating and interest. I'm like, let me give this a try and see what happens. And dating is like, it's got to be really active. It's got to be
Hmm.
action oriented. It's got to be it can't be passive. You really have to go all in. It's exactly like dating, for relationships. I mean, it's and when people don't do well in that, it's probably because they're being too passive. It's
Yeah.
probably because they're not playing an active role. If you're not trying, like, come on. Though
Yeah.
I like comparing it to how people are when they start a business and like,
Hmm.
oh, I got to work like 47 hours a day. I gotta like, I wake up at 2 a.m. I blink 3 times. I drink 5 glasses of water, and then I go and walk in the woods and then boom, I'm back. I'm coding away and all this. I'm like, I love that spirit, right? Like, I
Yeah.
get it. What you're doing, like you're saying that if you want to bring this thing to life that really matters to you, you really got to put in and give your all. It's interesting though, when it comes to dating, we do the complete opposite.
Mm.
We're like, how do I play it really cool and not seem like I really want to start this business?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
says no one ever about their business. Like, how do I approach my business like in a way where I don't really want to
Super
seem like I'm
nonchalant.
trying to, yeah, like I'm not really trying to start this business. I don't really want those customers who want to pay me money. Like I'm gonna like I'll get back to them in like 3 weeks. You know, I want to play it cool.
Yeah,
I want to give it time. No, you answer right away. And we do this in relationships though, where we take this step back and with our interests.
yeah,
Like when we become interested in something and we're like, ooh, that's something just kind of, you know, something about it just tickled my interest. I don't know
yeah,
why, I don't know how, I don't know what it is, but I'm intrigued. And what we've learned to do is say, yeah, but that's so outside of my world right now. I'm a fill in the blank, whatever your job is. I'm
yeah,
a teacher, I'm a an investment banker, I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a whatever you might say. This is outside of my wheelhouse. Like this is, yeah, this is too far-fetched. That's crazy. Why would I get into music now?
yeah.
Like, you know, I got a degree or I got an MBA or I got whatever. Like music is not for that. So like it
Yeah.
would be stupid to do that. And so we learn not to even approach. So
Mm.
forget about being passive like we are sometimes in dating people. It's like we won't even ask,
Yeah.
you know, the person out in that situation. In when it comes to interest, we won't even ask the interest out. Like we'll
Mm.
just leave it somewhere. And when you do that, I've read some research that you actually send a signal to your brain that this is not worth pursuing ever again. And
Mm.
so the downside of that is that there's a pretty solid chance that if you came across this interest again, you would already have trained your brain, don't signal me, like not interested. And so what I'm trying to help people do here with this new program that I'm building, because along the way, when I look back at my journey, I realized, wow, the biggest thing that I did that made or the thing I did that made the biggest difference was to date my interests, was to
Mm.
actively date them and go all in. And really, and by all in, I don't mean quitting. I just mean like I really gave it my effort. I really
Mm.
tried it. And if it didn't work after a few times, that was okay. You know, golf, I tried that, like I got into it up to a level and I
Yeah.
was into it, but then I wasn't as into it anymore and I stepped away. No guilt. I had a
Yeah.
nice time for like those few months that my buddy and I took some lessons and we went to a few golf courses. And then later on, I found my way there again. Why? Because I had never, I signaled to my brain that, oh, this was interesting once upon a time. And we took action on it. And then
Yeah.
when it was time to do it again, I was ready for it. So interests aren't necessarily like this linear thing that just happens, you know, forever. No, it's like it can come and go and all of those things. So I want to help people with this dating process. I want to help
Mm.
them with the discovering process. I look, if you've missed out on interests in the past, there, like I said, the research suggests that there's a good chance you probably can't go back to them. Like
Mm.
it's, you know, you've already kind of signaled to your brain and it may not seem as interesting anymore. But let's not look backwards. Let's look forward. How do we make sure that every future interest that comes your way, you have a mechanism or a vehicle for exploring them in a more serious way?
Mm.
Because I get it. Coming like, you know, you may not have an idea for how you could date each and everything differently. But what if I can give you a dating format
Mhm.
for how you could actually explore whatever the interest might be? And for me right now, I believe that one of the best vehicles for this is a podcast. It's a podcast
Yeah.
where the podcast is not the goal. The goal is to interview people who are doing the things that you are interested by. So if you've, let's say, something piques your interest in art or art history, you don't know why, but man, I just, you know, heard this thing and it was really interesting.
Mm.
Normally we leave it there because I don't have time to go do that. But what if instead you already had this podcast? It's called the, you know, it's called the Roger Osorio Show. So I can talk about anything I want, whatever Roger Osorio likes, I can talk about in that podcast. And I can just go in and say, you know what? Let me find 3 people, including perhaps the one who delivered that talk that piqued my interest. And let me just send them a
Yeah.
note and say, hey, I heard your talk and I've got a show and I'd love to interview you on the show and hear a little bit more about your career in art
Yeah.
history and
Yeah.
maybe how you got into it, whatever I'm curious about. Like, I want to ask you about that. Like, I want to ask whatever I'm curious about. That person most likely, most times will say, yeah, that's awesome. I
Yeah.
would love to do that. And if they don't, then go ask like 5 other people until you find a few,
Yeah.
or 10 other people if it's that's what it takes to find 3 or 4 people. And now I've talked to 3 or 4 people that are in this world and I've learned from them.
Mm.
And now, by the way, they're my friends.
Yeah.
Like these are people who are now like, if I message them again and say, hey, Alexander, like I interviewed you about, your career in music and all of this stuff. And you're going to be like, duh, Roger, hello. Of course I remember
Yeah, I
you.
remember you. Yeah,
And I'm
yeah,
going to be
yeah.
like, oh, I know it's been a year. Maybe you forgot me. But hey, man, so I'm working on something right now. So I've since then decided to like, pursue music, and I'm really trying to get into this thing. And I know that you've got some, people in your network that there. Any chance you could make an introduction? You are like so many times more likely to
Yeah.
say yes to me now,
Yeah.
because you're like, dude, I love what you did when you were just interested in it. You took action. Very
Mm.
few people go that far. Not only did you pick my brain about it, but you picked my brain and recorded it and put it out there for the world. You turned it into a mini project.
Yeah.
So I love that you're that into it and you're that committed, and that you you ship product. You make things happen. So I feel way more confident inviting you, who of course I know very minimally, but I know enough to say,
Yeah.
you're not going to embarrass me in front of my dear friends at this company, because you're someone who gets things done. And
Yeah.
that's, for me, that makes me feel good enough.
Yeah.
Versus once upon a time, I picked your brain for coffee, over coffee, and all you did was hear a bunch of my questions, and that I can show up to a coffee shop on time, or maybe I was a few minutes late, and that's all you really know about me, because
Yeah.
you just know that I had a lot of questions and that was it.
Mm.
But you don't know, can I really vouch for Roger? Like, is he going to make me look bad in front of some of these folks? Because I don't really
Yeah.
know him that well. I only had one coffee with him.
Yeah.
But when we do, as you know now, is doing this podcast, the podcasting relationship is so different.
Oh, it's wild.
and
Yeah.
and that's why I think that podcasting is a great vehicle for this. The vehicle might change in a few years, but right now I really think this is a big one,
Yeah.
because it also taps into the theory of self-determination. And one of the big parts of the theory of self-determination is relatedness, is feeling like we're connected to others who are a part
Mm-hmm.
of that world.
Yep.
And by the very just act of interviewing a bunch of people in the music world, or the art history world, to explore those interests, I am now making myself part of that world. The more I interview people in that world, the
Mm.
more connected I am to that world. And that will motivate, inspire me to say, you know what? I can create my own path in this world. And I know the people who can help me do it as well, because
Yeah.
it also takes the generosity of some folks who remove some obstacles, make some intros, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So all this to say that, I want to build a program, or I am building a program, a cohort-based program that I've already tested with students
Mm-hmm.
at Sarah Lawrence College, where I teach entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And I want to roll this out though to other groups, and I want to do like one where it's an open, like, hey, I want to explore some ideas that I have for
Yeah.
passions, and then cool, let me share this vehicle with you that will help you do that in a structured way, in a systemic way, in a way that you can do while you continue your day job. Because please do not quit your day job on a hunch.
Yeah.
Like, I want you to be like super sure.
Yeah.
And if you go on enough dates, you will be.
You will be sure. How can people? I know we're approaching the top of the hour here, but how could people find out more about this future program, your book, your podcast, or even reach you?
Yeah, I think the best way would be to find me on LinkedIn, which
Okay.
I think you'll be sharing that link.
Yeah, I'll put that in the notes.
So find me on LinkedIn, Roger Osorio. You'll find me there, and I will be posting as I roll out new things. And so, like, right now I'm also doing interviews
Mm-hmm.
for to understand more about how people come to discover and develop their relationships with their eventual passions. And this is research for my second book, which is going to be focused on this exact topic.
Mm.
And so LinkedIn is going to be the place to do it, because that's where I put all those announcements, like, hey, I've got this new thing going on and all
Yeah.
of that. So follow me there. You'll see all of my new content related to this, which is relatively new. It's already been coming out, but I've got more coming out as far as like how people can do this.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the best place. And so as soon as I'm ready to roll out a B2C version, because right now I'm working on a few B2B deals for this,
Mm-hmm.
but as soon as I roll out B2C, which I'm aiming for early next year,
Mm-hmm.
then I'll make the announcements there. In the meantime,
Awesome.
though, I am doing this in a one-on-one basis.
Mm-hmm.
So over 4 coaching sessions, I can help you get to that point where you've got the podcast, that you've got the vehicle, you're interviewing people, you're publishing episodes, so enough to at least keep that machine running.
Mm-hmm.
Now your job is to just go and talk to as many people as you can.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah. So
Yeah.
everybody, if you're listening to this, I'll post your LinkedIn in the show notes, but it's linkedin.com/in/Roger Osorio. ROGEROSORIO. Roger, thank you so much for being on the show. Thank you for also being the inspiration for getting the show up off the ground. Like this is credited to you. This is amazing. I've had such a
Yeah.
blast doing this first season.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I appreciate that you took massive action and you launched it. You made it happen. I mean, I can hold your hand up to a point, but at the end of the day, you took the final steps and you said, "Boom, I'm going to go live with this thing." And I see the posts when your interviews. I've checked out some of the YouTube videos, so I'm really glad that you are bringing this to life. So yeah, congrats to you, man.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, brother.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody else, for listening to this episode of Oddly Successful. And if you enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review, because doing so allows Roger's message to reach the folks who may need to hear it, to maybe start their own podcast, date their passions, and figure out what they're supposed to be doing. And those reviews just help us spread the word. So I believe in doing so, we can help more people find the courage to strike out and do what they were put on this earth to do. So thank you again, everybody, for listening. And until next time, well, until season 2, stay weird.